Hello and welcome to a new series of webinars to support teachers in the second cycle. These webinars go hand in hand with the new Ready, Set, Go coursebooks for the 5th year and coming soon for the 6th year. So on behalf of Edisonj Aza, welcome. Today's theme is all about the growing multicultural aspect of our classes and how we can get students to be curious about the different cultures in their classroom and embrace the diversity in what they discover, and how we as teachers can benefit from this and help our students learn more and better. We've all no doubt noticed changes in the cultural spectrum of the students in our classes over the last decade or so. This is not specific to Portugal, of course. For a range of reasons, the diversity of cultures in modern societies is growing wider. Digital nomads exploit connectivity to be able to work from more or less anywhere in the world that has an internet connection. Some of them, very sensibly, choose Portugal as a destination, and some of them either bring children with them or have children here, who are then schooled in our system. Refugees from various conflict or disaster scenarios have been in increasing need of support. Whether they are fleeing from war, drought or oppression, Portugal, again, is fortunately a safe home for them and their children. The freedom of movement within the EU also means that people from other European countries come here, looking for quality of life and employment. And all this is part of an ongoing trend of globalization where manufacturing and trade are no longer limited to the country of origin, which does not look as if it will slow down anytime soon. We can expect the cultural diversity in our classes to continue expanding. So, what are the implications of this for us as language teachers? Classes will be less homogeneous, meaning that while it may become more difficult to find a topic which we know all students can relate to and have some knowledge of, there are also more topics which some students know about and can share with others. The L1 in our classrooms is no longer as defined and predictable as it was. As we all know, use of students L1 in the English classroom can be a useful tool, but we have to be careful that we're not excluding some students from benefiting from that aspect. Ready, Set, Go already caters for speakers of other languages by providing support in various different languages in the interactive versions of the course. But the growing advantage is that with various languages in the classroom, it becomes ever more necessary to have English as the lingua franca. The first ever classes I taught as a teacher trainee in London had students from Europe, Africa, Asia and South America in the same class, and the sense of unity provided by everyone facing the same challenge of communicating only in English was exciting. As part of our multi-skilled classroom management, as has been pointed out, a good teacher needs to be a psychologist, a nurse, a leader, a supporter, a manager, an assessor, and increasingly a sociologist, among other things. We need to make sure that students from minority cultures in the classroom do not end up being excluded, as in-groups and out-groups are quite naturally created. We have an inborn tendency to congregate into familiar groups, but there are ways we can also help these groups recognize each other's worth, learn from each other, and grow in various different ways. That's what we'll be looking at in the next half hour. So, here's what we hope to achieve in this half hour. We'll look at practical ways to encourage students to embrace and celebrate the diversity around them. We'll explore ways that we as teachers can leverage these differences to help grow cohesion and connection. The students will, we hope, grow more culturally aware and interested as a result of the opportunity to put these ideas into use. And we'll look at ways we can make use of all this variety to enhance the students' learning of English. The first step is to recognize the diversity and give students a chance to display it, feel proud of it, and share it. This, of course, includes the Portuguese students as well as other national or cultural groups in the class. Posters are a great way to do this. Anytime we produce a poster, it's always done with sharing information with others in mind. No one makes a poster for themselves. Students can work in groups, in class, or outside of class time as an extra project to make a poster which includes their country's name alongside other information to make a colourful, attractive, informative overview of their country and culture. So, don't make this a huge project. The idea is for students to be able to share something about themselves. In other areas, we do this in little 5-minute speaking activities. But this is something that can build cohesion in your classes, and it's worth spending more than a few minutes doing. Having said that, it doesn't need to be complicated. The country name and a map constitutes the basic information, and then other parts can be added to the poster over the next weeks, often as they occur in the syllabus: food, clothes, traditions, festivities, etc. Students can use simple phrases to label their map, English being the common thread that ties them all together. Just something like "our flag" or "my country is here" with an arrow. One thing to bear in mind is the balance between cultures. There will probably be more groups working on a Portugal poster than one for Bangladesh, for example, but the display should remain balanced between the cultures. So the posters for Portugal will need to be on rotation and replaced regularly. Even at this basic level, students can see and enjoy the differences while noticing, even if subliminally, though you may want to point some out, the similarities between what seem like very different cultures. The fact that we all have flags, the similarities between festivities or the foods that everyone enjoys. It is also finding these similarities while recognizing individualities that help students find cohesion. Don't forget, you are an important component in encouraging cohesion. Comment on the posters and the contents of all cultures. Things you like, things you want to try, etc. Oh, I love that. Wow, I want to try this. That's my favourite too. Join in. Another way of helping students to learn about each other's cultures is via a culture quiz. This may involve a little more preparation on the part of the teacher, but avoids the time that can be lost in doing a poster project. Although, of course, as I often emphasise, this kind of time lost is won back big time, as it leads to improved class cohesion and enthusiasm. The basic information is still best supplied by the students, so they are invested in sharing their culture with others in the class. A culture quiz can look like this. If you want to do it in an interactive format on the board, there are various free, simple apps you can use to make this kind of drag and drop exercise. It doesn't even need to have the confirmation of a correct answer built in. The students can confirm their own information. Arranged around the map of the world, you can place items to drag and drop. As with the poster, this is the country name, the flags, the food, the clothes, the traditions, etc. As you cover more items in the syllabus, the quiz becomes fuller and more complex, but students are encouraged to revisit the information more fully perhaps than looking at each other's posters. You can, of course, make a different kind of quiz with Kahoot. As we all know, this is quick, simple and engaging for students, though there may be some constraints on the use of mobile phones in classes in some schools, of course. Questions can be like these ones. What's the capital of Ukraine? Mwamba is a typical food from which country? With multiple choice answers for the students to choose. Another idea is to make a quick same or different activity a regular feature in your classes. Especially at moments of cultural interest like this one, talking about films and locations, it's great to get the view of students from different countries and backgrounds, sharing their experiences or knowledge with the class. It gives all students a chance to contribute by answering a simple question and enabling others in the class to learn something about all the different home countries. Once the students have the idea of same or different, you can use it to compare ideas on different topics that come up, hobbies, food, etc., as well as being an opportunity to focus on culture It can also be used to encourage students to notice differences or similarities between English expressions or phrases and their own language. The classic example being, of course, I am X years old in English, the form of which doesn't coincide with many languages which tend to use have for ages. Noticing and remarking on these things via a quick same or different activity can help students remember the correct form next time. This idea can be extended into something which enables L1-L2 comparison for speakers of all language in the classroom. A phrase of the week poster, with the chosen phrase in the middle, can be added to by speakers of different languages with their own L1 version around it on the outside. Straight translation is not generally recommended as a language teaching approach, but having comparisons to associate with the new phrases the students learn gives them more ways to memorize and fix them. Even versions of the phrase in different languages can provide another peg to hang knowledge from. When it comes to fixing an idea in the brain, it's very often true that the more prompts, and thus the more ways to fix and recall, the better. Putting the phrase in the middle with Velcro, enabling it to be taken away, means the students can also do a back translation exercise, trying to remember the English version from the translations around the now empty space in the middle. Alternatively, use something to cover the phrase in the middle while revealing the surrounding translations for the same kind of effect. As you go along, you can build up a bank of these to recall and revise key language. I first started thinking about the potential difficulty of following a dialogue guide when I was researching the importance of cognitive load and trying to be more aware of it in my classes. The basic premise of cognitive load is that it is very easy to make activities that are too complicated and have too many moving parts. Following what can be a quite complex diagram, turn-taking, making decisions, choosing the appropriate language, and also remembering and applying new phrases and vocabulary, this can all lead to brain shutdown for some students when the cognitive load gets too much. So, I hit upon the idea of students doing the dialogue in their own language first, and then, when they feel confident and they know what to do and what they want to say, moving into English. I must admit that I have never tried it when two students are doing a dialogue each in their own L1 in two different languages, but as well as giving them the necessary thinking time to find what they want to say and what suggestions to make, for example, it can also make one thing clear. It's much easier to understand when you're both speaking the same language, in this case, English. With the common language making that bridge, the reason for spending all this time practicing something, which may sometimes seem a bit abstract, can become much clearer for the students. So, I hope some of these ideas will prove useful in your ever more multicultural classes. To finish, I'd just like to go over a few other things to remember, and I'm sure that you also have others to share. Put a comment in the chat for others to benefit from, if you like. These are the kind of things which I find it's easy to forget, and which have perhaps become so much a part of our everyday teaching style with monolingual classes, especially those of us whose teaching careers go all the way back to the 1980s, like mine, that we may not be aware of them as possible barriers to inclusion. First is the idea that, by default, we speak to the class in Portuguese when we want to explain something important or clarify vocabulary. I admit I have been doing this recently with large groups of kids doing storytelling in their schools. I chose Portuguese to explain what the signal for whole class attention was. This runs the risk of the majority being informed, but the minority ending up even more excluded. It's difficult at times to do a lesson only in the target language, but of course it's possible. and could even be said to be a best practice. It maximizes the exposure to the target language and becomes a very real and valid means of communication in the classroom when it's the true lingua franca. When I arrived in Portugal, I spoke zero Portuguese, and I worked with classes of complete beginner-level children and adults. We did it all in English, building layer upon layer of meaning and comprehension. Now is the time to start putting that skill into practice, and many of you probably already do. It's good to relate what we're talking about to students' own experiences or ideas, of course. But let's get into the habit of asking, what about in your country, rather than, what about in Portugal? A variety of answers where students can learn something from their classmates is even more enriching, and it makes the question more genuine. I mean, why would a Portuguese teacher ask about Portugal when they already know the answer? But if the teacher asks about a range of different countries, that's the basis of real communication in the classroom, something which multiculturalism fosters. One of the most difficult things for me working with multinational classes was getting to grips with the names. In the classes on my initial teacher training course, I had students from Turkey, Germany, Algeria, Spain and Thailand. Learning their names was a struggle. Interestingly, students from Thailand, and indeed this is true of some other Asian countries, didn't actually want to be called by their real names. In their culture, that's reserved for family and very close friends. And in situations like school and work, they use a nickname instead. Another thing to be aware of and use when necessary with Asian students. But unless the student specifically asked to be called by a Portuguese version of their name or their cultural nickname, I believe it's a mistake to depart from their true name. Let's celebrate diversity by using their real names or our best attempt at pronouncing them. Do remember that there is support for extra languages built into the Ready, Set, Go course. Various languages supplied by certified translators and many others via automatic translation. At times when you can't get the idea across in English and don't want to be exclusive by using Portuguese, this is an excellent resource to use. And do insist on English in group work, especially where there is a speaker of another language involved. Again, it provides a more linguistically rich environment and it ensures that all are included at the same level. Win-win. Above all, enjoy your multicultural classes. There's so much to learn from our students. Thank you. See you next time.
Lei Educação. Ponto de encontro.